Hello, everybody, and welcome to session 2 of our 5-session series, Welcoming Newcomer Families. This is an integrative 10-hour focus on how we welcome newcomer families in different ways to assess belonging, how we're utilizing our resources. And speaking of resources, today we're going to be moving on to accessing them. How do we do so? And I'll be going through some resources that have been made available for everybody so that there is a consolidated space for folks to see what they have and what they don't have, what they would like to have in the future. Before this, we were doing a session on getting to know newcomer families where we did a very thorough review of context, where our newcomer families are coming from, and the systems that were designed to support their legal rights and how they can navigate it. Today, in terms of accessing resources, we have quite a busy schedule ahead of us. So I'll be beginning by introducing myself again for folks that are new to the room and for the case of the recording as well. So my name is Ann Tang. I am a senior trainer and family engagement manager at the Federation for Children with Special Needs. We are an umbrella organization that engages and empowers families, especially of children with disabilities from birth to adulthood. During this course of time, we've done a lot of work on family engagement. And while we've been really, doing this family engagement work, we've been slowly reaching out more to diversifying crowds such as immigrants, English learners, and newcomers as well. And that is really where I step in. So I've already started the recording, but I'd love to hear from folks that are here today. If folks could unmute themselves if they feel comfortable doing so, or putting their information in the chat on their name and title, school, district, and community, as well as their experience with newcomers. With that, I would like to also add in an icebreaker this time to our Zoom group today, just because today we have a pretty cozy group of folks, and we've already done some introductions in the last session. So for the icebreaker, I'd love to hear from folks on what one positive experience that they've had with a newcomer family in their district has looked like. I can begin with my own. Aside from the work that I do within FCSN, I also tutor some families and parents English on the side a lot of the times at the library. And when I've been doing so, we've been doing a lot of work lately with a particular family on applying for jobs. One of the mothers that I work with last week just got a job offer, and I am so excited for her and her family. It's going to be great. And talking about this just really makes me happy. So that is one piece of good news that I have to share about the families that I work with. I see that there are a couple of things in the chat, and I'm just going to read them out loud. Regina says, hello. She's a Portuguese family liaison at Everett Public Schools. Thank you for sharing. So happy to have you here today. Is there anybody, I'm going to stop sharing for a second so we can just look at folks again. Is there anybody that would like to also say hi while we're in the space together? See a couple of familiar names.
I could share positive. So when our families moved into the local hotel here in Everett, I took the team of liaisons to them to do the enrollment for school. So I got to meet a lot of the parents. And since I live in the community, when I go to the local markets and the family sees me, they get excited, so I always give a big smile. I'm a hugger. I'll give them a hug, and just, it makes them feel good and like they're part of the community. So
That's amazing to hear. That's such a heartwarming story. I love that so much. In terms of my own love language, I am also a very huggy person. So I totally agree with how much it really brings to the table. Just, that simple act of just hugging somebody really brightens somebody's
yeah,
day. I love that. Thank you for sharing.
you're welcome.
Is there anybody else that would also like to share something while we're in this space together? I see Carmel in the chat. Hello, Carmel. So good to see you again from the Welcome Center. Carmel, we would love to hear a story from you if you have one, but if not, that's totally okay as well. It's just great to see everybody's names and hopefully faces later on if you feel comfortable doing so. But I'm gonna re-share my screen again. Oh, just kidding. I see, Carmel, that you've unmuted yourself.
I was going to share my story registering two children that were transferring from a school in Worcester to Malden. And I contacted the family many times and I couldn't get mom to let them know when school will start. Then when finally yesterday I could get mom, it was 8 o'clock, and I told her the children can go to school. And once the kids heard about it, they jumped out of bed, get ready, and they were on their way to school. I went to the school to help them out with translation around 8:20. They were already at the school waiting for me. So that makes me feel happy because they were happy and waiting, and we could help them to get into school.
No, I love that connection that you make, Carmel. That's so exciting to hear about. I love the stories. I really do. And thank you so much for sharing, Jeanette and Carmel. It's so nice to hear from you. Um, I'm going to keep sharing my screen so we can go back to the slides. But love to hear from you. And the next session, I'm hoping to hear more too. And then I can also ask a different icebreaking question for folks if there's anything that you feel like you'd like to share, would love to hear it. Is there anything wrong with the screen somehow for anybody else on your end? I see that there's a bit of a block on mine, but I don't know if anybody else sees it. I am assuming that is no, so great to hear. I'm going to keep going. Okay, in terms of today's agenda, we're going to be reviewing as thoroughly as we can how we've come to getting to know families as a whole, as a session as a whole, in terms of understanding context. So we've created a glossary for folks to go through. It's as shortened as we possibly can make it due to the time constraints that we have today. And then afterwards, I'm reviewing like a brief review of what we went through last time. We're going to go in and introduce some toolkits and state resources that are available in terms of how to access basic services and basic needs for folks, where people can go to provide this information and share it. We're going to follow that with a discussion on local resources, what that looks like for folks, as well as a breakdown of language and accessibility. Lastly, we're going to follow with solutions and building knowledge. In this sense, we're going to be able to, give me a second while I figure out the tech for a hot second. There we go. And in this critical reflection period, we're going to be able to really think about what all of these accessing resources, getting to know families really means in terms of how it can be pertained to a more personal note, how it's related to your district. Um, in terms of all of this content, we're going to be doing this as fast as we can in an hour and a half, so that in the last half hour, we have time to do some asynchronous work, because we heard from folks that a lot of these afternoon sessions really cuts into dismissal time. So this is our workaround around it for folks that are coming in but haven't come to the last session. This is why we're doing this. And I will be here as well in the space with the Zoom, so that while folks have the chance to do asynchronous work for half an hour and still get all 10 hours of PD credits, we can also do it together up until the point at 3 p.m. so that we stop completely at 2 hours. If that makes sense and everything is good to go, I can continue, but I'm also going to wait for a minute to see if anybody has any questions about the agenda and also just the general breakdown of what the sessions look like. Okay, I'm hearing no questions so far, so I'm going to keep going. Okay, we began last time with understanding and being introduced to the belonging diagram. And this is here for folks to navigate how to build this community with our newcomer families in the sense of placing ourselves on different milestones. On a clockwise motion, we first start with understanding context, we move on to accessing basic needs, and then respecting language and culture, and lastly, partnering with communities. All of these integrate together to create intersections where these four milestones really play into each other so that the main point we want to really emphasize is how there is no priority in these milestones and that each of them play a really critical role in creating belonging, both within the educational system and outside of it. It creates a more culturally sustainable way to look at how we can create solutions and how we can think of strategies and integrate them into our everyday classrooms, despite the numbers of different types of newcomers coming in all the time. Because we understand through this belonging diagram that there is no one size fits all blanket solution to how we welcome newcomer families. Every district is different. The folks that have spoken up in the last session and in previous webinars have all said of how they've been utilizing different strategies, and this is going to be continuing for probably the long haul. So this is a really great diagram for folks to just kind of consider and look at when they're thinking about how to, partake in welcoming families, what their role is, and how to spread resources. Feel free to screenshot this if you'd like to just have it on hand for the rest of the presentation, because this isn't always going to be on every slide. But we'll be going back to this pretty often during this presentation so that we all are able to relate the context and the contents of this session back to how we can create belonging. So moving on from there, we went into understanding context through systems, history, and demographics. We watched a video on history and particularly how refugee families come to the States, and that before the resettlement process that they go through in order to enter the districts that they're currently in, they, had different backgrounds and experiences on how they left their home country. All of them went through a very vigorous process of screening by federal agencies such as USCIS in order to be determined as eligible as a refugee or as a newcomer into different communities. And knowing this sort of context to how folks were going through the process of getting into where they are today, we then looked at demographics. On the screen are two charts and graphs. One on the left is the summary of US refugee admissions. All of this data is available public record by Department of State and also the Department of Homeland Security, as well as the US Census. So if you're curious, folks may already have the slides to the last session. You can look them up. You can, crunch some numbers if you'd like. And if you're curious to what percentages of your newcomer families are coming from generally holistically this data, but on this chart, you will see the last 4 months worth of data regarding US refugee admissions. This isn't holistically everybody because this only covers refugee admissions. There are a lot more types of newcomers that we may be seeing and welcoming into our communities during this time as well. But this is a pretty large percentage of families. To the right of the charts, you will see a pie chart with the statistic that we emphasized particularly hard last time, and that about 1 in every 6 Massachusetts residents is foreign born. Again, this is from the census. This is a public statistic that you can find throughout a lot of state agency websites as well. But I think seeing these two together really ties in the idea that welcoming newcomer families is ongoing work. And because of all of these statistics and the knowledge that 17.6% of Massachusetts residents is foreign born, this is going to be particularly important work that we're doing here today to family engagement and how to sustain it. Next, we talked a little bit about systems. We began with introducing Plyler v. Doe of 1982. On the slide, you will see a load of text on the left about Plyler v. Doe, as well as a chart to the right about the number of foreign-born Massachusetts residents. All of this information is pretty critical to understanding the role that public schools and just educational systems in general plays within this community and context of supporting newcomer families into the fold. But Plyler v. Doe, as we've stated before, is the act that says the states cannot deny access to public education to undocumented immigrant children. In other words, despite how many kiddos you have in your fold that have public records and official paperwork, such as birth certificates, it ultimately does not matter in terms of registration, because all children, regardless of having official paperwork or not, are eligible for elementary and secondary education. So this is important to know, and we'll be talking about other laws that and rights and acts that relate to understanding context, our systems, and Plyler v. Doe a little bit more later into the session. And we'll also be relating that as well in upcoming sessions regarding language and culture. But this is an important piece of information to know. It's also, I think, very helpful in understanding how to speak about welcoming newcomer families, especially if there are communities that are anti-welcoming newcomer families, depending on your situation and your district. But in regards to what rights there are for newcomer families and what is protected, there are legal protection and clauses that dictate the amount of support that folks get. We then ended a lot of the more wordy information that we were giving out last time with some shared terminology. This is a very small glossary on a lot of important newcomer terms to know, particularly when it comes to newcomer families, immigrant families, mixed status family, undocumented immigrants, and refugee families. These are words that folks would find helpful in terms of identifying which types of newcomer families with what statuses you're welcoming. A lot of them are different, but sometimes they have slight differences, and they really speak loads on what types of experiences, what fears folks have, and what backgrounds that they come with in terms of, being able to engage with folks officially, being able to understand information, what types of information they would be more fearful of. And overall, it's a really great way in terms of understanding more of this terminology to be able to really access a more two-tier communication and be able to understand where folks are coming from. So we've gone through this in the last session. I'm placing this here just as a reminder for folks, but all this information is accessible to you as well. We'd like to begin our discussion for this context of, after getting to know families, moving over to accessing basic needs by talking about what we've spoken in previous discussions, particularly on Tuesday's Jamboard discussion, after we talked about all of these contexts. So I've attached a link here. I'm going to stop sharing for a second while I share the Jamboard link to you in the chat. but what I would really like for folks to do is to look at this while I share it. I think this is going to be helpful in terms of being able to follow along. So give me a second. There we go. And I'm going to be sharing my screen again so that we can all look at the same thing. Okay. Everybody see this okay?
Yes.
Okay, amazing. But this was, oh, give me a second. There we go. This was all of the notes that everybody very thoughtfully put into the Jamboard in our last session when we were talking about challenges that folks may be facing and how that relates to the belonging diagram. I'm going to give everybody 2 minutes to just read everything over because it's been 2 days since we all looked at it and it just would be helpful to review. So I'm just going to start the 2 minutes, and then once everybody is done reviewing this, we'll come back into. Okay. Would anybody like extra time to take a look at this? You can give me like a thumbs up or do a reaction on the Zoom so I can see you or just speak up. Okay, seems like we are good to go. And let's dive into reviewing what we talked about in the Jamboard. We weren't able to do this last time because we simply ran out of time, but I think there's a lot of really useful information on here. And I want to add a particular thank you for Chelsea to putting down your district and the post-its. In the future, when we're doing sessions like this and we're using the Jamboard, it could be very helpful to put down certain districts if you feel comfortable doing so. And if you would like for FCSN to follow up with you on anything that you're bringing up as a concern, placing your district down is going to be very helpful for us to remember who is asking for support as well. But if there's anybody that has gone to the last session that put something into the space, we would love to hear you speak on one of the bullet points that you pointed out that is a challenge that you'd like to discuss. I'm going to open the room up for folks that would like to share regardless, but please feel free to do so.
I feel a challenge. It's that we don't have as many we have resources, but we don't have enough to manage the influx of families that are coming in. So we do the referrals, we try to do the best that we can, but this just isn't enough, and that's a challenge. And then a second challenge is trying to find a pediatrician for them. They'll come in and they'll say that they don't have an appointment to see a pediatrician, and it could be 2 months out. So that makes it hard to try to help them get the vaccines that are needed, to get a physical. So that's what we face a lot here in Everett, is a lot of the medical stuff. And
yeah, Thank you, Jeanette. That's very helpful to hear. I'd love to follow up with you afterwards too, if you're comfortable with that, in terms of what types of medical care we can help provide aid with. FCSN offers some support in navigating healthcare, especially for English learners, so that might be helpful for you. But I definitely hear you and agree that it's difficult to be able to find the amount of resources available for all of the demands and needs coming in. Is there anybody else that has something to say regarding that or would like to share another point?
Especially in our area, since Chelsea, Everett, Revere, like we're so close to each other that we're all trying to go for the same resources. So it's really tough. But yes, I would definitely love to have a conversation with you to see what we can do for families.
Okay, I'm going to note that down so I remember to follow up with you, but thank you so much for speaking up about that. It's good to know that since Chelsea, Everett, and Revere are in the same regions, that this probably is going to be an issue for most folks within those districts. So thank you for sharing. I'm going to open the floor again to folks that might want to share, and I'm just going to give it a minute for people if they feel comfortable speaking up before we move on.
I think coming from a district that had more needs but also more resources, it's hard now to be in a district that hasn't historically needed resources and now is needing resources with the influx of newcomers, without a medical home, without insurance, without access to TB testing. And so we're trying to invent the wheel because there aren't any resources and that serve the town that I'm in currently.
Thank you for sharing that, Regina. Wait, no, it wasn't Regina, it was Susanna. Did I get that right? I'm seeing two monitors at once, so I'm a little confused about who just spoke.
Susanna.
Thank you, Susanna. Could you remind me what district you're from again?
Needham. Sorry, I'm going to be offline for a bit.
No worries, Needham. Okay, that's good to know. I definitely agree that it's difficult to do so when historically there wasn't any system set in place for issues like this. Hopefully the resources that we're going to be sharing in the next coming minutes of the session is going to help with that. But we would also just generally love feedback on what you need so that we can get more specific about the resources that we're consolidating and sharing. But these points are really helpful to know. I would love to hear more from you about this in the chat if you'd like to share more and you felt like there wasn't enough time during the session for you to really speak up about any of these challenges that you're facing. We're always looking to hear from you on feedback about how we can improve the connection and communication between federal and state resources and the local community. So with that being said, I'm going to move on from here and share the presentation again. Give me a second while I reroute myself and go back to where I was. While I'm doing this, I'm also going to be sharing a brief introduction as to what we're going to be looking at together in the next couple of minutes. What we have created to support students, families, and also educators in the process of trying to navigate what resources are available and what is needed is we've decided to create a newcomer forum. This forum is done so through the learning management system LearnWorlds, which creates little pockets of information and also little pockets of places for social media within like a safe and consolidated space. The hope in doing so is to create opportunities for folks to speak about what they need and to network to share resources. What is often the case that we've been seeing is that a lot of folks, you know, aside from the things that Susanna, Jeanette has been speaking about, is that there's a lot of resources that folks need, not a lot of time to get there. And oftentimes with the resources being spread all over, it's very difficult to gather them and to figure out what is possible, what is feasible. So to counter that, we've created this online forum with the hopes that firstly, it's going to be a space with consolidated federal and state resources. And secondly, that there is going to be space in here for folks to connect and place their thoughts and create opportunities to engage in local resources, local networking, and just sharing in general. So with that being said, I don't know why this was so hard for me to share, but I am going to reshare my screen and show everybody this course. Feel free while I'm speaking about this to ask questions anytime. It's going to be a lot of information from here to go through because this is a new system for everybody. But this LMS has been immensely helpful for also FCSN in general in terms of how we structure our systems. So this is a space where we're going to be going through this course in particular, Welcoming Newcomer Families. I'm showing you this page instead of the course generally because in order to go to the course, one would have to create a profile for free so that you can access the social media and networking widgets inside the course. It's very simple to navigate, not very hard to really get the hang of, but one would have to make a profile in order to access this. So I'm going to click in and show you what the resources look like. Give me a second, it loads for a bit. There we go. Okay. This is the official site for the online forum on welcoming newcomer families. It's primarily a space for educators to discuss and share resources. If anybody else would like to access these, it is no issue at all as long as they make this profile for free. On the homepage, you'll see a little bit on the belonging diagram. This is written in a way that is accessible as possible for folks to really understand what the diagram means to the work that we're doing. And there is an image on the left with arrows that pinpoint to intersections within these different milestones that we had just explained. If you keep going downwards, you will see that there is a lot of text, but what that all means is that there are different sections that you can go through to find resources on understanding context, assessing basic needs, respecting language and culture, and partnering with communities. After all of these sections, you will find a space for feedback if you would like to talk to us one-on-one on what you want to see. But I'm going to click into the first one on assessing belonging as a whole so that you can look at the consolidated information that we have so far on federal toolkits and guides, state resources on family engagements, as well as a space for discussing and evaluating progress. Barbara, I see you in your chat. I am going to put the link in for you so you can take a look at it. And while I'm going through this, feel free to make the profile so that you can access the course directly while I'm talking about it. Give me 5 seconds to do that. Okay, everybody see that link? I see a thumbs up. Thank you, Carmel. Great. Feel free to make a profile while I'm going through this. But let's go through what this looks like and why this is labeled as an online forum instead of a place where we just put links. Once you click into any of these free sections, the only ones that you will see that are not available are the other two milestones that we haven't gone through yet, respecting language and culture, as well as partnering with families. The reason why they're not free yet and accessible for folks is because we're still looking for feedback up to the very last point where we present this to you next week, so that once we hit a milestone every session, we'll be able to open this up. But we're looking to get as much feedback as we possibly can before we officially open it. But you'll be seeing this next week pretty soon as well. But in terms of the first section on assessing belonging, we're on the federal toolkits and guide page, and you will see links to the toolkits that are the biggest and best sources of information federally. The first one is the Newcomer Toolkit. I'm sure that a lot of folks already have this information, but in order for all of us to be on the same page, I would like to highlight this again, that this toolkit consists of 5 chapters. It introduces and welcomes newcomers. It goes through a glossary of terms that is much wider than what we've been able to go through. And it also has a lot of really good stuff on the rights of families and legal protection and some tips and also some pieces of information for schools to look at while they think about how to really engage in family engagement practices. You can click on this and it'll go straight to the page in a pop-up window. The second one is the English Learner Family Toolkit. This consists also of 5 chapters, and this is directly in response to what the family needs. So it goes over enrollment, attending school, available educational programs, extracurriculars, health and safety, and also how to promote school success on the family's end. It is available multilingually in English, Arabic, Chinese, and Spanish. I know that there are a lot of folks here today that work with a lot of Haitian Creole speakers. Unfortunately, it has not been translated yet to other languages outside of these 4. But this is a really, really great source for folks to use if they want to just skim through the chapters that they need to look at and then take them out for any translators and interpreters that you have in your district. It would be really great for folks to use, but we're highlighting the Newcomer Toolkit as well as the English Learner Family Toolkit because the Newcomer Toolkit is specifically designed for folks that are managing the system. So any educators, all of us, we are the prime target audience for the Newcomer Toolkit. But in terms of the English Learner Family Toolkit, this is specifically geared towards family. It's a family-friendly and accessible language. And both of these are being constantly updated live so that whenever you go back into the website to take a look at the toolkit, when there is new and significant information that is critical for us to know, it's already going to be in it. So these are really great resources for folks to use. Aside from that, I've also linked the educational resources for immigrants, refugees, asylees, and other new Americans page from the Department of Education there below. This encompasses all students, not just elementary and secondary, so this may be very useful for families as a whole and not just the students. While we're going through all of these toolkits and guides, I'm also going to be explaining how this online forum works. This is a forum because within each page of this website, you will find a space for you to connect. This is my profile. Hello. So I'm in here with you as well. But we have prompts that you can think about while you're reaching out to folks. This is specifically a group for federal and state resources. So these federal toolkits and guides and the state resources on family engagement in the second link are linked together in terms of this forum. So if you if you type in a message, I'm just going to put in the prompt again for folks. You can share. You can heart it, you can upvote it, and you can add comments below so that if somebody has a question, feel free to post it here, and there may be more folks that would know the answer. Or if you would like to discuss any of these resources, leave a comment here and to let us know what other types of resources you want to look at in terms of federal toolkits and guides, let us know. And this is a really great space for people to just chat. This is why it's called an online forum instead of anything else such as a toolkit. I'm going to stop here right now because I know I went through a lot of the technical side of this website, but do we have any questions so far about how you can navigate this resource? I'm going to give it another 30 seconds, just in case. Okay, seems like folks don't have any questions so far, so I'm going to move on to state resources on family engagements. So once we click in over here, you will see a variety of links, particularly from DESE. These are all the most important and consolidated links that we have been able to gather so far related to English learners and related to newcomer families on DESE's page. If you see any that isn't there, if you would like to know more information, again, feel free to put this here. You'll see that this forum, like I've mentioned before, is connected to the one on the top. So if it states the similar, like the same title, then it's going to be within the same chat. You'll see more prompts, but feel free to put in your own. A lot of these resources, like I mentioned before, regard English learners in particular with disabilities. There's one on cultural proficiency, some resources for supporting immigrants and refugee students, and a pretty large FAQ on how to enroll and support newcomer students if there are any questions that you may have with registration. A lot of this FAQ also goes back on specific laws and rights that folks have. So if you want to click on that and take a little look, you are more than welcome to. One other feature that I have not mentioned yet is this highlighting feature. When you highlight something, oh, not over here in the text. When you highlight something, these show up, and this is something that you can utilize to, really emphasize information for yourself, to place a comment and to write questions if you have any that's specific to a link and not just generally in the forum. So there are a lot of really great tools that you can utilize in this LMS. This highlighting is one of them. And if you would like to discuss just generally on this page, you're able to do so over here as well. These are the profiles of folks that will be joining. I see that Jeanette has already joined, and so has Regina and Barbara. Happy to see you here. But once more folks join in, you'll see some of our staff as well here, as well as me. You'll be able to connect with learners one-on-one, and also reach out to them and check on their profiles to see what districts they're from and such, so that everybody has access to everybody. We're going to go back to this path and look at the last page on assessing belonging, which is discussing and evaluating progress. We know that a lot of this work can be very overwhelming. There is a lot that we need. There's a lot that we need to do. So this is a space in general for folks to discuss how they're going about things, what their progress is looking like, and to ask any questions related generally to newcomer families and not specifically to any of these. So this is just a space for folks to, celebrate any milestones that you've been able to reach, talk about your issues and frustrations, and just really, become a community. Moving onwards to the second section on understanding context, which we primarily went through last session. You'll find some terminology here, as well as links to more and citations on different types of newcomer terminology. This list, of course, is not exhaustive. There is a lot more there, but in order to not overwhelm this page, these are the ones that we've decided to keep. And we may add more as we see more concerns coming in about different types of folks joining us. So down here, there are more prompts as well as this general sections forum understanding context. This video is linked to YouTube, so you can also access this and send it to other folks that are not within this website if you would like for folks to have a more broader and general understanding on the specifics of how refugees are integrated and welcomed into the States throughout the process of resettlement. Lastly, in terms of understanding context, we have a space on demographics. We went through a lot of statistics last time that were very helpful for folks in terms of zeroing in on what areas newcomers are coming from. So these are places that have live reports on statistics. If you are curious and looking more and just crunching some numbers yourself, and there is a space over here for folks to discuss where newcomer families in your district are resettling from and coming from. Do we have any questions so far on the section of understanding context? I'm going to give it a couple of seconds before I move on.
Hi, Anne, it's Claire Basham.
Hi.
I apologize, I came a bit late, and I'm wondering, where is this website? Is this on the FCSN website?
Hi, Claire. Thank you for joining us. That is no problem. I sent the link, but I'm going to send it again
Thank
to the
you.
chat so you can access this. To give you a brief rundown, this is not directly on the FCSN website. It is through a learning management system, which is why we're able to integrate forums and social media-esque sorts of discussions into this. It's a brand new website that we're trying to navigate, so please excuse any flaws that you may see. We're working on it, but we're hoping to launch this as soon as possible, which is right now, so that folks can just jump in and look at any resources that they're able to access or not able to access. In order to go into this course page, all you have to do is to create a profile, and everything here is for free. So it may say a course, that's just how the learning management system designs the information, but it's really in forum.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Of course. Are there any other questions?
Not right now. Thanks.
Awesome. I'm going to move on then for folks to the third section, accessing basic needs. We have identified so far 3 main spaces in terms of basic services that folks are asking for the most, and that's healthcare, food resources, and English learning. So if you have any other basic needs that you like to see on the site, none of these lists, again, are exhaustive. We're constantly looking for ways to add to them. If you know any community sources, this would really be a great way to just kind of dump them in from the profile or just from, contacting me directly. But you'll see that from all of these resources, what we've been able to provide for folks is federal and state resources, and a couple of more widely known state organizations, because each district is so different, and we could not possibly put down all of their sources in every area. And that's really where we're hoping that folks can come in and share their experiences. But going over to the healthcare module of accessing basic needs, it's a live list. These are the ones that are probably going to be the most helpful, but I also wanted to highlight this in particular. I think I've already highlighted it before, which is why it's a different color. But working with certified application counselors or CACs to apply for Mass Health, this is something that FCSN is right now pushing. We have a couple of certified staff that are application counselors that can help school districts with registering their newcomer families for Mass Health. So if you know anybody that needs this resource, please feel free to contact me either through email or right after this content, so that we can connect and then get you settled in for a CAC. But Aside from that, we have some information on the Department of Public Health, an immigrant health toolkit from HCFA, as well as the helpline for HCFA. If you think of any specific types of resources, I've heard from some folks earlier today on TB testing, needing, what was it? I think it was either primary care, something like that, a pediatrician. Those are all resources that we can look more into. But please let us know and feel free to dump more information into the chat if there's anything that you'd like for us to take a closer look at. In terms of food resources, we really wanted to emphasize Project Bread and the Summer Eats program. They have a free of charge program that provides free meals to all kids under the age of 18, regardless of status, at locations all across Massachusetts during the summer. So this is something that we can start pushing for families to know about before the summer begins. They also have a food source hotline that is statewide and toll-free that connects folks to SNAP. But below here, you will find the SNAP application assistance website if you would like to register any of your newcomer families for SNAP or redirect them to it. We have resources for finding your local food bank here. If you have more specific ones that you like to share strategies that they've been doing, or just, really prominent locations, feel free to share them in this part, accessing basic needs. We would love to hear it, and I'm sure everybody else would as well. And lastly, in terms of English learning resources, one of the key barriers to communication and family engagement for us is definitely English learning. We've attached a couple of links here. One is completely virtual, but the rest are sorted by region. So Eastern, Western, and Central Massachusetts. A lot of these are public library resources, and a lot of them you can find also through your local community colleges. But all of these projects have completely free English learning programs that you can direct your newcomer families to if they would like to learn more lingo, not just generally, but also more specifically if they, are looking for spaces to apply for jobs. The library is a really great place to go for resume help if your school district is not able and is not at the capacity to provide this sort of support. As well as a space for folks to really connect and find community. My families that I tutor on the side are really excited about the resources in the library, particularly because it's a really great place to find community. So this is a really great resource for folks to just kind of redirect to your newcomer families as well. Below, same deal, there is a prompt, but feel free to add more information or questions as you need to in this forum. Lastly, we have a space for feedback. We would love for you to give us any sort of constructive feedback that you have on this forum. If you would like to give us any, direct tips or any direct sources of information that you are looking to see but isn't on here, feel free to let us know. But in general, this is the resource that we're going to be using to share a lot of basic needs help. So I am hoping that this was comprehensive for folks and that you're able to really utilize this and share this. We'll be using this also with DESE. So DESE is going to be sending it out to a lot more folks. Today, we're really prioritizing, really getting folks in from districts that have emergency shelters, but seeing that there's so much need, we're going to start really broadcasting this to every district in Massachusetts. So that is a brief overview on this forum. Does anybody have any questions so far that I can answer? I know I went through a lot of information.
That's such a great resource, and I'm looking forward to scanning through and seeing what's there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad it's helpful. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad it's helpful. But feel free, as I mentioned before, to keep letting me know if there are specific points of information that you're finding is lacking on the forum, and we'll be sure to add it in. because it is a live forum and we're just constantly going to be adding in more resources as we see the need to. But now that we've gone through the forum, I like to zero back and talk about local resources that are available for folks. I've mentioned before that the forum consists mostly of state and federal resources because of the limitations of what we can do. But this is really where we're hoping to find space for folks to connect and find opportunities to really share what they have, share common challenges that they face. So with that being said, we do have a smaller group, so I'm not going to jump into a different, I don't think it's super necessary to jump into 2 breakout rooms. I think it's okay if we just talk about it like this today. But I like to share again the Jamboard that we were using before so that we can go on to the second slide. Okay, putting this in the chat. And I'm going to share my screen over to there. What we're really looking to do now that we've introduced state and federal resources more clearly is to find a way for us to have a discussion on what local and community resources we're looking for. And this is really important in terms of how we view the belonging diagram, because without partnering with communities, we cannot really fully integrate the sense of family engagement for our newcomer families. It's going to feel like they're stuck in 2 places between looking into community resources and looking into systems. So with that being said, I'd like for us to focus on the second page. This is the first page. If you click over here, we'll go to the second page and to start a discussion on what local and community resources we're looking for. I think this is also a really great space for folks to just share where they're coming from and also find ways to network if possible. So I did mention before that I didn't think it was necessary to go into Zoom groups, but we do have a little bit more than 10 people, so I am going to still create Zoom groups. I'm going to share the link again and then put everybody in. Now. Okay, for the recording's sake, we are looking at the completed Jamboard, full of context that we've been gathering for the last 15 minutes, 10 minutes, not 15, on things that people would like to hear more about or resources that they would like to share. So we begin with opening up the floor for folks if they would like to say anything in particular that they were speaking about in their groups.
I would just love to figure out
Mhm.
how often and who and what the parameters are for deciding whether towns and cities get free vaccines. Because I think as the demographics of towns are changing, I'm hopeful that they will look at that, because free vaccines for our public health clinic would certainly help us be able to serve unmet
Mhm.
healthcare.
Susanna, that's a really good point to make. I'd love to find out more on that on your behalf as well. So I'm going to go in and speak with folks that I can to see how they do so and what we can do to alter the system. But that's a really great point. Aside from vaccines, or if there's anybody else that would like to add on to the discussion on immunization, is there anybody that would like to share as well?
I was just gonna say, if you could let me in on that as well.
Yeah.
Because here, I mentioned during our breakout that in Everett, the health department used to, before COVID, they would administer vaccines, and now they're not. And according to them, because there's no vaccine, so, is there a shortage of vaccines? What's happening? Because I know other districts, they are giving vaccines in their community. And I've also reached out to Cataldo, the ambulance service, and they are licensed and they're able to give vaccines. So they did ask how would they get paid if they will come here. And
Mhm.
since our families have mass health, I'm like, I believe that you could get their information and that will be covered under that. So that's something we're waiting for, to see if Cataldo comes in and does a vaccine clinic for us.
That's a really great resource to share, Jeanette. Thank you for saying that. I see that vaccines is a pretty big issue for a lot of folks. Aside from that, I think on this page, medical access, so healthcare is the biggest thing, and the second thing is ESL, translated documents, and job readiness. I think a lot of this is really tied together in the English learning sort of sphere of things. Is there anybody that would like to speak on that? Okay, I'm still going to leave the floor open if folks would like to share, especially in the chat, but I'm going to be pretty cognizant of time here and also move on so we can look at the last slide or two before we go into asynchronous work time. So I'm going to share back to the slide. I have many tabs open. So give me a second. Okay, here we are. Sharing screen, back to slides. Okay. Can folks see my slides or is it blank for people?
We can see a screen, but it's blank.
I don't know why this is happening to me. We're getting everything fixed today. There are people coming in to fix the Wi-Fi, but otherwise I can only wait. Apologies for the tech.
It's working.
Okay, but here we are. I'm assuming now folks can see the screen okay. Is it still blank for people?
It's blank and black now.
Oh, that is so difficult to deal with. Let me see.
Yeah, I don't see any. I see your cursor, but that's it. Now
I am
now I see it.
unsure. Is it loading for you too?
Loading, yeah.
Okay. Well,
We can do it this way, right?
it's prepared for me. Oh no, not
That's
like
it.
this. Okay, I'm gonna go back over here. Does everybody see this now? Or is it just me?
I see welcoming newcomer. Yeah, language and accessibility.
Okay, thank goodness we're finally here. Thank you for bearing with me. But I'd like to share a little bit on language and accessibility before we move on to the asynchronous work. And these two are particularly important while we think about Plyler v. Doe from 1982, because this pertains to the rights for students to and families to receive language accessibility. So Law v. Nichols from 1974 states that students that are not proficient in English must be able to participate meaningfully in educational programs and services, and that programs receiving federal financial assistance, particularly public schools, do have this legal obligation under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act to prohibit such discrimination. And that has led to the Equal Education Opportunities Act from 1974 as well, in that we have to take appropriate action to overcome language barriers that impede equal participation. So all of this is to say that while there is this disconnect that we're seeing from us receiving resources from bigger systems to aid in this sort of language accessibility support, the basic structure of it is still there. And there's a lot for folks to catch up on in terms of bringing all of that support back to us. But knowing that the system is here, there are a couple of things that we can do to aid and support this process as best as we can. In terms of getting to know what parents and guardians as well as students need to know, we think about language and accessibility, especially when we're giving all of this basic needs services that we just went through to families in terms of how we communicate. Is it just purely to get the language out there, or is it for understanding? And a lot of that comes down to how we speak, particularly when it comes to translanguaging. Translanguaging is a term that is an umbrella term widely used to describe encouraging folks to use multilingual support. So instead of just doing English and then Spanish again and then Mandarin, for example, we encourage families and students to speak to us, and also for us, if we're able to speak to them multilingually, so mixing up terms so that the one thing that we're getting across is not just the exact language, but also the general understanding of it. A couple ways to really utilize translanguaging outside of the typical usage of translation interpreters and also cultural brokers is also to use images and plain language. We really wanted to specify the use of plain language because a lot of the times when translating things over, such as the basic needs resources, and if we're speaking to folks, especially English learners with disabilities, on things such as IEPs, the translations of these acronyms and jargon does not come across the same way as they would in another language. For example, folks might be familiar with this example that some of my colleagues really like to use. When we speak of IEPs and we use this acronym, translators may take IEP and also this whole language as a whole and translate it into Portuguese, into PEI, and that will cause a disconnect between families when they're looking at the two different acronyms. This is one of many examples. This isn't really as applicable for Mandarin, but the general tone of that language is still there. So we really encourage folks, when you're sharing these basic needs resources, to use the complete wording as they have it, even if they in the website have acronyms that they don't explain. If we know them, to just list it out for the families, and to notice and avoid any hard to understand language, and also idioms as well. But lastly, in terms of language and accessibility, we also want to really emphasize what modes of communication look like. While we've been talking to some folks entering these sessions, we've heard that sometimes there is this disconnect between registration, up to the point where the semester starts, and then maybe educators or administrators don't see a lot of these newcomer families again, just the students. So making sure if folks are still receiving newcomers into the cycle at this point into the year, asking about their communication preferences when they are immediately registered is a really great way to get a hang of them, as well as offering lower tech options. I know there's a lot of difficulty in accessing tech for these families, and that a lot of school districts are working on making this accessible, but making sure that while we're doing these modes of communication, that there is this awareness of usage of plain language as well as multilingual support. I know it's difficult, but this is something that is going to really help a lot. But also offering trainings or utilizing the sources in the basic needs online forum that we discussed earlier for folks to go in and build these skills. For example, a lot of these English learning classes that we gave folks to take a look at earlier have a lot of modules on how to access technology. So those are really great spaces to redirect families to if folks are looking for a place to teach people on how, and families on how to build skills on tech and also English jargon within the school systems. But that is really all we wanted to say on language and accessibility up to this point. In the upcoming sessions, when we're speaking on the milestone of respecting language and culture, we're going to be tying that a lot more into, usage of cultural brokers, what that looks like when we're translating documents for basic needs, as well as getting to know families. But for now, this is where we're going to end the actual content of our recording. I'm going to be stopping the sharing, screen sharing in a little bit, but just to also let everybody know that from the website from which you registered for the session, there are a couple more webinars coming up in April and May. These are all open to anybody, especially folks in the school districts that may need them. So if you know anybody that would be interested, they would be really great sessions for folks to connect and also to hear more context, not just from me, but from other staff from FCSN as well. We're going to be doing these sessions for the next week as well on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 3. Hopefully this time is still going to be good for everybody here. If you know anybody that would also like to join in on these sessions, please feel free to share with them the link to it. We're going to be using the same Zoom room for everything so that it's easy access for folks. So please share if you can, just to spread the word out. And after everything, I'm going to be sending follow-up emails at the end of every week for folks on all of the slide information again, as well as handouts that we'll be using for asynchronous time. If you know of anybody that would like to earn PDP credits from this is a really great source to do so, especially if they're in a district with emergency shelters. We really highly encourage everybody to attend all of these sessions to get the most out of this information. And with that being said, I am going to share a link to our feedback forum so that folks can let us know if there is anything that is missing today that you would like to hear from us again. For this asynchronous work session, we have until 3 p.m. I'm going to share a breakout room in a session for folks to go in and do the work and just, really familiarize with yourself with the handouts. But in terms of the handouts, they're very general, just so that folks can have the space to really go in and personalize it. Thank you. I'm going to stop recording.